All right, looking at these two triangles. Do they look similar? Yeah, for the most part, they do. Now, to be similar, on that very first quiz of the year, very first question of this calendar year, a couple days ago, it said for things to be similar, the angles have to be congruent and the sides have to be proportional. Angles congruent, sides proportional. 40 is congruent to 40, 60 is congruent to 60. What are the two missing angles? 80 and 80, because there's 180 degrees in every triangle. So 80 and 80. So all the angles of the triangles congruent. Yeah. So now we got to check if the sides are proportional. So what you do is you go short to short. Well, the shortest side is 24 and 30. Short to short. Then you go medium to medium. Well, that's 32 and 40. And you go long to long. That's 36 and 45. Now, what's 24 divided by 30? Get out your calculators. 0.8. What's 32 divided by 40? 0.8. What's 36 divided by 45? 0.8. If they're all 0.8, are they proportional? Yes. So yes, these are similar because all the sides are proportional and all the angles are congruent. Now, what happens, and I'm going to skip past all this boring stuff. What happens is if you have two angles congruent, you know the third angle is going to be congruent, right? And if you have two angles congruent, all this boring stuff up here said, well, then the sides will have to be proportional if you have two congruent angles because of parallel lines. These would make parallel lines, which would then make things proportional to each other and yada, yada, yada. So what that says is, as long as you know there are two angles of each triangle that are congruent, then triangles are going to be similar to each other. So all you need to know is two angles. If you know two angles are congruent to each other of each, then the triangles are similar. Now, knowing that in your mind, we're going to scroll back up here and look at these two. Now, the first triangle has a 61 and a 61. The other triangle has a 61 and a 52. They might be similar. Let's see. What's 61 plus 61? 122. What's 180 minus 122? 58. You think they're going to be similar? Don't think so. What's 61 and 52 add up to? 113. 180 minus 113 is 67. Are all the angles congruent? No, we knew that after we added up the last one. If the angles aren't congruent, there is no way, Jose, that they can be similar. Okay? The angles have to be congruent for them to be similar. Okay? Now, besides the angles being congruent, if the sides are proportional, then we know that they're similar. So, A is 3, B is 4, C is 6, D is 9, E is 12, F is 18. So A to D is a 3 to 9 ratio, which reduces down to 1/3. B to E is a 4 to 12 ratio that reduces down to 1/3. C to F is a 6 to 18 ratio, which reduces down to 1/3. So these look similar, okay? Now, the angles have to be congruent, the sides have to be proportional, unless it's a triangle. Because in a triangle, all we need to know is that if all the sides are proportional, then they're going to be similar. So, if you know two angles are congruent, then they're similar. If you know all three sides are proportional, then they're similar. Okay? So let's look at this one. Let's see if these are similar. So, 3 would go with what on the right-hand side? 4.5. 4 would go with what? 6. And 5 would go with 7.5. If we take 3 divided by 4.5, we get 0.6 repeating. What's 4 divided by 6? 0.6 repeating. What's 5 divided by 7.5? 0.6 repeating. Okay? If they're all 0.6 repeating, are these similar? Yes. So then I'd say triangle ABC is similar to, it only uses one curly Q with no equal sign underneath, to what? It would have to be DEF, because if I went this way across the shortest and the medium, I have to go across the shortest and the medium. DEF. Okay? Now, there's also one other way to prove triangles similar. If this side here is proportional to this side here, and this side here is proportional to this side here, if those two pairs that surround these angles are proportional, and the angles themselves are congruent, that makes these two triangles similar. Then the triangles are similar. Okay? So, triangles are similar if they surround congruent and the sides are proportional. Okay? If the sides that surround the congruent angles are proportional, it makes the triangles similar. So we want to know the length of MN. But before we can figure out the length of MN, we got to see if it is similar or not. Now, if this is 75 and has 2 marks, since this has 2 marks, it is. And if this is 1, this is 1. So these two have a ratio of 75 to 1. These two have a ratio of 75 to 1. And they surround angles that are congruent. Why are these two angles congruent? From all the way from chapter number 2. They're vertical angles. So vertical angles are congruent. So since vertical angles are congruent, we have side angle side makes them similar. So if they're similar, then the sides are proportional. What is a proportion? Well, it's a 75 to 1 ratio. The 10 is on the 75 side. If we make this an X, it's on the 1 side. Okay? So now we have to solve my proportion. To solve a proportion, you cross multiply. We take the 75 times the x, which is 75x, the 10 times 1, which is 10, divide by 75, x equals 10 over 75, divided both by 5 is 2 over 15. So it's 2/15, or we could write it as a decimal. Okay. This type of problem always comes up when we hit this chapter. I don't care what textbook it's been, it's just a constant. The sun is shining and it makes a shadow. So, if Avery is 6 feet tall and he leaves a 5-foot shadow, how tall is this tower if it leaves a 40-foot shadow? Now, Ella knows the laws of the town say you can't have a tower over 50 feet. Avery says, I don't know how big my tower is. It's pretty tall up there. I'll have to see how tall it is. He's not going to climb up there and measure it. He's going to use proportions. Okay? If he knows his shadow is 5 feet long and he's 6 feet high, and this is 40 feet long, well, he should be able to figure out how tall that is by setting up a proportion. So if this is x, we go 6 over x equals, and then we go in the same direction, 5 over 40. So if we cross multiply, 5 times x is 5x. 6 times 40 is 240. And if we divide by 5, what do we get? 48 feet. That tower's 48 feet, which is less than 50 feet, so he can have it in his backyard or wherever he has it at. All right, so how do we have similar triangles? Well, if two pairs of angles are congruent, then we have similar triangles. If all three sides are proportional, then we have similar triangles. Or if we have two sides surrounding an angle proportional to two sides surrounding an angle that are proportional, and the angles are congruent, then it's similar. Okay? So that is all we are doing today. Friday, I will be gone. Okay? So I'll be gone Friday. You're going to take a quiz without a review. So I'm not going to be here to go, remember, this is what you do, this is what you do, this is what you do. So you're going to have to take the quiz by knowing what you did on the homework. So if you don't understand the homework, ask questions so you can understand it before you take the quiz. Okay? That is important.